Welcome to The Corrected View, a podcast about myopia control and the people devoted to its role in specialty care. I'm your host, Matthew Herzberg, the Executive Director of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. If you've listened to our podcast before, then you'll notice that we've done a little bit of rebranding recently. We used to be called the Ortho-k podcast, exclusively due to the AAOMC's strong roots in orthokeratology. But recently, I've decided to cover not just ortho-k on this podcast, but also the other subject-worthy topics and exciting aspects of myopia control that are happening in our industry. So from this point forward, each episode of this podcast will be devoted to discussing news, education, and important topics in and around not just ortho-k, but also myopia control. But this isn't a podcast where it's my opinions about myopia control that are the ones that count, but instead yours, the clinicians, academics, students, and industry experts that make up our overall larger community. In the episode I have for you today, I talk with Paul Levine and Cary Herzberg about the recent Misight FDA approval, the importance of axial length, and why this year's Vision by Design is going to be the best one yet. Speaking of which, if you haven't heard about Vision by Design, it's the annual education meeting of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. VBD is a 4.5-day conference completely devoted to ortho-k and myopia control, and it's running from April 15th through the 19th, 2020 in Bellevue, Washington. VBD has been called the friendliest meeting in eye care, the Super Bowl of myopia control, and the best place to not only learn how to bring ortho-k to your practice, but also the latest cutting-edge trends and research in myopia control from the world's best experts. For more information and to register, head on over to www.orthokmeeting.com. Now, on to the discussion. All right, I have with me the president of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, Paul Levine. Paul, welcome back to the program.
Oh, thanks, Matt. It's really it's a super pleasure to be here and to be included in this, and I'm excited to talk about the upcoming Vision by Design 2020. So, I really appreciate you doing this and inviting me to join the call.
And also we have the chairman of the board of directors for the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, and that's Cary Herzberg. Cary, welcome to the program.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Paul. It's a pleasure
Hi, Cary.
again. Hi. It's a pleasure to be on board here and be talking about myopia, my favorite subject.
Definitely. So I wanted to kick things off by talking about the recent Mysight FDA approval, which happened on November 15th in 2019. And I was hoping we could go into that a little bit and talk about it. And I thought, why don't we start out by basically, for those who may not be aware, what is the Mysight product? Go ahead.
Okay, so all right, MySite it's new to the U.S. It's been around for a little while outside of the United States, but it's from CooperVision. It's a one-day disposable contact lens, and it is unique in that it's the first product really, I think, to be granted an FDA approval, not just as a contact lens for contact lens use, but it's actually approved by the FDA from myopia control, like literally using those words. It's a proven commodity to slow down the progression of myopia. And that FDA approval just came through about a month or two ago, and it's huge. It's a game changer. The lens itself, I think, is going to be an awesome addition to our myopia control arsenal that is at our disposal. But just the fact that the FDA allowed the words myopia control into the language is an absolute changes everything. So it's huge for us. And it couldn't come at a better time, as we all know.
Ask you about was the specific terminology of myopia control, and for the uninitiated, why is that such a big deal?
Well, it's a huge deal because, we when we make recommendations to our patients, when we manage our patients, when they come in and look to us for guidance, many parents, and I'm seeing more and more of it every day, the parents are asking, what can we do about this? I'm not comfortable with my kids' eyes keep big on getting worse. What can you do to help? It's really nice to have that backing, to be able to use that phrase myopia control, and to feel comfortable using it. There'd been some debate about using that terminology, but now that we have some approvals through FDA, and this is a recognized term in the industry, it really opens up what we can do, and I think it's going to be attractive to a lot of doctors that are just trying to get involved with myopia control. Being able to do things in a proactive manner, being able to use products in a proactive way for these kids and slow down these changing myopes. They're coming in younger and younger. They're coming in with higher and higher prescriptions, and they're changing multiple times a year. It's just getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Paul.
Yeah,
because I think it's huge. The politically correct term myopia management. I mean, it's never really excited. Never got the blood moving. I thought, well, what is myopia management? It doesn't really say. You can manage myopia and watch them get much worse. We have been managing improperly myopia for how many decades now? So I totally agree with you there because we don't want to be. I don't think the time for political correctness is gone. Let's get to it. I mean, let's roll up the sleeves. Let's say what we're really doing here. We're actually, the FDA, as you said, is actually sanctioned the use of the term myopia control because they've actually approved it. So it's time for us as an industry to start accepting the fact that we want to be controlling myopia, not just managing it. So I think that's a huge difference there, and it was a watershed event to see that happening. I was in Europe at the time in Transylvania at the EUROC meeting, and to have that come through, we thought it would never happen. I was at the Silver Springs meeting 5 years ago where we actually sat down with the FDA, a number of us, and talked about what were going to be the parameters of if they were to do myopia control. And to think about the fact that the FDA said, in so many words, that the risks of myopia are far greater than the risks of eye infection with contact lenses. I think that's a huge thing because there's many doctors still in the field today that won't fit kids with contacts. And here's the FDA saying, guess what? We're going to take that risk with contact lenses. It's a very small risk compared to the effects of long-term progressive myopia. It's just a watershed event for all of us.
I want to add something to that. Not only is the FDA approving this lens for myopia control, it's approving it for kids as young as 8 years old.
Correct.
And so, that tells you everything you need to know about the safety profile of the lens, as well as how important it is to control myopia. That, the FDA is granting use for this in as young as 8 years old for myopia control. That's huge.
And, in our industry now, the myopia control industry, as we're going to talk about vision by design, it's many things, right? It's more ortho-k, it's the MySite lenses, it's the soft multifocals, bifocals, it's atropine, and it's axial length measurement. So, I mean, this is an entire thing that will begin it with children much younger than 8 years of age, actually, if we do this properly. So we really have to get into the mind sync, and this is going to be out in front at VBD, in the mind sync of starting to, how do you treat the adolescent population? How do you go from being just in general being in practice and going to a pediatric practice, because that's where myopia control is truly practiced.
So what are the fundamental differences between the MySite and ortho-k then?
Well, the difference is, obviously the protocol for wearing the lenses is completely different in that, it's put, the MySite is a daily wear lens that's worn, throughout the awake time. Ortho-k is a product that's used while they're asleep, but the benefit and why we think all of this works is the way the optics are delivered basically to the back of the eye. Whether you're molding the front of the cornea to optimize the optical properties of that eye, or you're using a contact lens that has varying powers across the front of that lens, you're altering the optics of the human visual system. With either product, with all of the products that are available to us. Not just MySite, not just ortho-k. There are multiple contact lenses that are being used,
Right.
with terrific success out there, by creating these optimized optical shells. We're seeing evidence that it's working, and the science is proving it.
And there's so many things going to be presented, the vision by design, that go into these things, including the choroidal thickening and the choroidal involvement in myopia control itself, the choroid itself. And then Earl Smith talking about some of his lecture, his lecture about peripheral defocus, and then even central mid-peripheral defocus, his new findings that are going to be available as well. So yeah, so this is the meeting, Paul was right on there, and this is the meeting that's going to really teach all of us attending the newest stuff that's coming down as far as myopia control.
So let me ask you a question then, and again, maybe this is just showing my ignorance on the topic, but how do these different modalities interact with each other? Like, is MySite going to have a wider scope of application? Is this something that's going to come in and destroy ortho-k? Like, is there going to be, is this the future, or is this just one tool in the toolbox?
That's always a great question. There's room for everything here, I think, and I don't see it being something that's going to replace something else, but add on to what we can do in the field. I know certainly in my practice, which is almost totally ortho-k, I don't sense that MySite's going to really replace that, but I do see possibilities and instances where I can use MySite in place of ortho-k, where I normally do an ortho-k lens, because MySite makes a lot of sense for this patient rather than ortho-k at that point. There are applications, depending on how high the prescription is, depending on many other different factors that you have, why you do one or the other, or for heavens, why you'd use atropine initially or use it with either combination of these two treatment programs.
I think it really does come down to lifestyle, and part of your evaluation has to be an exploration of lifestyle. So you may have you're going to find parents that have some opposition to wearing ortho-k lenses, at night. But then again, you're going to have parents who think, oh, that's a much better approach for me and for my children, because I want to be available to them when they have lenses on their eyes. So if you have kids that are wearing lenses throughout the course of the day when they're away from home, now a little bit more of that management falls on the child. So I don't see a daily use contact lens eliminating the need or the desire for ortho-k. But I think that when you break down, when you have at your luxury, really, multiple different ways of achieving similar goals, it's a win-win for everybody, because the doctors can make recommendations that they feel comfortable with, and the parents ultimately and the patients have to they have to weigh in on what makes sense for them. So being able to have, like I said, multiple tools in your tool belt is that's the name of the game. So you're not just an orthokeratologist, you're not just a soft lens fitter, you're a myopia control specialist.
Amen.
And that's what you need to embrace.
And you need also, with this whole scope, I see it as an increase in scope, Matt, Paul. I see the scope of what we can do, more and more things, that we couldn't do before, even with this FDA approval and the fact that we have these products coming down to us. But it also involves training from the doctors. The young doctors, our younger colleagues, and whatever point you come in at this, you have to be trained, and you have to learn how to do informed consent for all these things. And I mean, in my practice, it's been growing pains, because we grew through the ortho-k thing into atropine and multifocal soft lenses. So we've had to develop informed consents for all those, to inform the patient, education, staff training, all these other things. There's no better place for this than Vision by Design for myopia control. There's no place on earth that's better to do that for our colleagues than to come to Vision by Design and learn how to do this right.
Okay, well, I mean, that sounds like a pretty good transition into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is Vision by Design and that program. Obviously, you guys are very excited about it. You've both had huge hands in, designing the program along with the rest of the education committee. And from my role of, just doing the administrative side of things and watching the education committee communicate back and forth about the program, and one thing I keep seeing over and over again is, especially from you, Cary, is, this is the best VBD yet.
Hmm.
So I was wondering if you could speak to that comment. Why is
Yeah.
this the best vision by
Well,
design yet?
it seems, in this field we've been, and Paul, can chime in on this thing, but I think in this field now we have to really, none of us are, we're specialists. We're not, we don't do everything, right? I mean, we can't know everything and can't do everything. We have to specialize in certain areas of our field, of our practice. And I think it's really important to understand how this meeting now, Vision by Design, was put together, and Paul did a major, excellent job with this. We've worked with our brothers and sisters from COVD, to bring in that binocular vision aspects that now everybody's crying for, and that wants that input on myopia and binocular vision. They've finally come back to basic stuff for us. And so, we have this program put together that involves all these different disciplines from, the different fields, that are put together. It really is an amazing thing to witness, because all these different people are here to talk about it. I mean, the experts in all the areas that we're now discussing and all the implications.
I think we're going to, one thing that I wanted to, I think where I'm most excited is, there's a lot of new stuff coming from this meeting. And, we're going to be digging. Cary mentioned it a little bit earlier in passing, but one of the things that you're going to really learn a lot about axial length and how important axial length is in managing your patients and understanding your patient's risk, in having a purely objective way of analyzing and measuring progression. And we're going to be hearing multiple lectures about axial length. We're going to be hearing lectures about how choroidal, what place does the choroid play in myopia, and how that's, influencing axial progression and axial length changes. We're going to hear a lot about that stuff. We're going to hear about combination therapies, adding atropine to your ortho-k patients, adding atropine to your soft contact lens patients or your spectacle lens wearing patients. We're going to really be hearing the real cutting edge stuff. And I'm glad you brought up the COVD thing, Cary, because as myopia control specialists, we have to be very mindful of the power of the binocular system and the binocular anomalies that are assisting in the progression of nearsightedness. And I think a lot of lifestyle changes and a lot of binocular analysis and vision therapy, I think, is a whole area of myopia control that we're getting more and more involved in, and we're going to have lectures and workshops on at this Vision by Design.
Yeah.
So if I can reach back,
it's a good and bad news kind of thing, I think, too. The good news is that the doctors are going to have to know more. The doctors are going to have to be prepared to change the ways that they're practicing because of the new technologies that are coming down, the new information that's available. So the bad news of that is the fact that you're going to have to come to meetings like this to learn these things, because you can't just sit there in your pod, in your office, and expect to absorb these things by listening to reading some magazines or whatever. You're going to have to come and listen to the folks that actually do this stuff on a daily basis. I know for myself, I've learned so much on axial length measurements and applying to my practice. I've been doing myopia control since the mid 80s. I've changed the way I practice in the last year because I added an IOL master. So I mean, what are the implications of that? Well, it's mind-boggling when you think about it, because we can get so much better at this. Don't you guys agree?
Well, that's what I wanted to bring up was, axial length is, it's a term that I'm seeing a lot more and more of. And, you keep saying like it's important and we're talking about it at Vision by Design, but why is it so important? Why is axial length so important?
Well, I'll take a swing at this one. Okay, what do we worry about with myopia? For starters, we worry about the elongation of the back of the eye, of the posterior chamber of the eye. Well, it's one thing to worry about it. It's another thing to know what it is and how much it's changing. It was guesswork, before. The other thing about axial length that's, like I said before, is it's purely objective. So it's not a measurement of visual acuity. It's not a measurement of refractive error. It's a measurement of literally size. And that is not influenced at all subjectively, whereas refractions are subjective, and the reading of a visual acuity chart has subjectivity to it. There's also examiner subjectivity. when you're doing a refraction. Well, is that an extra minus a quarter or not? Well, why don't we not put that extra minus a quarter in there? Axial length is a measurement that can be looked at over and over again and compared side by side, and there's no other influence there. So that's why it's so important. And I think the thing that Cary mentions about how it's changing his practice is if he has a 12-year-old -3 with an axial length of 23, he might respond a little bit differently to that same kid with an axial length of 26.
Right, absolutely. Not only that too, Paul, but we've learned now that if you're going to really be into this myopia business, you can't just throw a drug at somebody. You have to really manage that patient properly. You have to really control the myopia. So you can't just prescribe 0.01% atropine and let them go home, and not have them follow up and come back to your office. That's irresponsible even. You can't put a multifocal soft contact lens on it without whatever power you want to deem is in that lens and then not monitor that patient to see if their eyes are progressing or not. You shouldn't be doing ortho-k either unless you're monitoring the patient's progressions. So the myopia now is the overwhelming thing that, Matt asked the question earlier, will this replace ortho-k? It's not that kind of a question. It's the question of how are we going to deal with myopia? How are we going to deal with this progressive epidemic that's destroying the vision of our children, the eyeballs of our children, literally? And another thing is look at your different ethnicities, and how that impacts that. You've got to know all in all, and some of the stories you'll hear at Vision by Design is that it's just not an Asian myopia controls. It's not an Asian thing anymore. We have practitioners that are doing this thing on African American populations, Hispanic populations that are also driving their myopia to high levels. So again, I think the overall theme is controlling myopia, growing in that management of myopia, growing in your abilities, being able to, yes, you're going to have to spend a lot more time with each patient, but in the long run, you're going to be helping the people a lot more, and you're going to be growing your practice in the ways that you want to, because it's preventive care, right? How do you do preventive care? It's education, and this is what we're talking about for this awesome meeting coming up.
It is awesome. It really is.
It really is, man. This is cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be really exciting to get to a point where there are, this many different options, for a myopia control specialty. Whereas in the past, my familiarity being, hearing doctors talk about ortho-k, and then atropine pops up, and then all these other things. And now, so it's got to be a pretty exciting time to have more options.
Oh my gosh, man, I'm talking to my pregnant patients, and they're asking the questions back in, especially if they have already on your side. They're asking what they should do with the new one coming, the newborn, how that should be treated. It's behavioral too. It's like, we a couple years ago, Paul, in Orlando, remember Donald Tan spoke about treating hyperopes with atropine.
Yeah.
Because, why let them become myopic? I mean, there was a great lecture at when I attended the MySite certification program I went to earlier this year. And it was a lecture on even at 6 years of age, it's a critical time to look at a patient. And even if they're hyperopic, guess what? They might be, unless there's this degree of hyperopia, they're actually elongating, and this patient needs to be, looked at that point. So we as optometrists, we as ophthalmologists, as eye care providers need to relook at our patients now. We can't wait for people to get myopic. We have to be preemptive in that. And how do we do that? You have to look at little weebies, little kids. You have to learn how to do pediatrics. You have to learn how to take care of your patients properly. And it's all going to be there at Vision by Design this year.
Okay, so for someone who's never been to Vision by Design, because in my capacity working for the Academy, I hear a lot from different doctors, like at a trade show or a conference or whatever the case may be. And I say, have you heard of our education meeting, Vision by Design? And they say, oh yeah, I heard about this. A friend of mine went, they told me to go last year. And I'm like, why didn't you go last year? Oh, I was thinking about it, and so-and-so, and, so-and-so had said the year before that. And you have people who are hearing about the meeting. Obviously, the word is out there, which is excellent and fantastic. But I'm hearing a lot more from people who are, every year they're just that much closer to going. So I guess my question is, what can we give these people who have never been, who have heard about it, what's a lecture or a set of lectures or something that's going on during our general session, our Friday through Sunday program, like can really get people excited about?
Well, I mean, one thing I'd like to talk about is where there's a lot of didactic information that gets given. There's a lot of science that gets discussed, and there's a lot of theory that gets discussed, and studies, and it's all so important to learn and to hear. But what we do, I think, better than anybody is teach you actually how to use these products. Through whether it's through manufacturer seminars, which we have a ton of, workshops, which we have a bunch of, and even from the lecture podium, you're going to hear discussions on how to fit these things, how to do it, advanced level fittings, advanced level troubleshootings. And then we need to be able to transition those teachings and that foundational knowledge into what do you do when you're back in your own practice? And what do you do when you get into trouble? And how do you go about becoming successful with this stuff? And to that end, we're super duper excited. We're going to be launching what I think is going to be another game changer for our members as an amazing member benefit. We're bringing out a state-of-the-art, really high-tech way of mentoring and helping doctors from their own practices go over cases and get some troubleshooting tips and some help from the experienced and the seasoned fitters and the fellows and all of our amazing, awesome people that we have as members of our academy.
This is going to be a resource available through membership. This is going to be a member benefit of becoming a member of the AAOMC. Is that correct?
Yep, that's exactly right. And I'd love to get into every detail of it on this call, but this is going to be this is a grand celebration that we're going to be rolling out at Vision by Design, and you don't want to miss it. You got to be there for it.
Friday afternoon. It's a lot of things that I do today, and Paul does as well, is we mentor other doctors, and I think we do a pretty good job of it as it is. It's time consuming in a way, but it grows the soul. It grows it because we want to grow the next generation of ortho-k fitters, to take over and stuff. So I'm constantly doing this, but this new thing now, when you see it, it's just it's like that latest high-tech stuff, and it's really going to make everybody's job a lot easier, and it's going to let us get to these doctors and their fits and really help them.
I think, Cary, you had said before, you said good news, bad news, and you said the bad news is that you have to go to more and more of these conferences. Well, I see it as good news because nothing gets you more excited and fired up, and I know that you know it because you're you're the number one cheerleader for all of this stuff. So it's like an opportunity to get away from your practice for a couple of days and just put your head into the next chapter of your practice, and when you get back into your offices, now to have this in your back pocket as something that can help you get over those early humps, I think it's just going to be, I think it's going to be super duper exciting for everybody involved.
And I think we need to define a little difference here too, because there's a lot of stuff out there, myopia conferences, right, Paul? There's a lot of stuff going on. They're having a myopia conference here or there or whatever it is. And I know I talk to my colleagues about this stuff. Only at Vision by Design, I mean, in the hallways, from the podium, whatever it is, you're going to be getting real tools to do this, real abilities and skills that you'll pick up doing this. It's not theory. It's not just theory. There's theory there, but it's not all that. It's a lot more than that. There's substance to the theory. And you're going to be able to walk away with really key things. That if you don't walk away with at least 10 new things that you haven't done before, I'm going to be surprised. You need to come to me and tell me about it, because there's plenty more than 10 out here for you, for anyone who's practicing myopia control.
Well said, definitely. Well said. So, Vision by Design is going to be April 15th through the 19th in Bellevue, Washington. We kick things off with boot camp for newcomers. So if Ortho-k is something that, don't know anything about, or maybe you know something about it, you need a refresher, we have a 2-day pre-conference event that teaches doctors everything they need to know to bring Ortho-k to their practice. But it's not the only thing happening as a pre-conference event. We also have the Myopia Management 2020, The Future is Now. And Paul, I was hoping you could go into more detail about what that is, because we have boot camp for the brand newbies, and then we have this event on Thursday afternoon. And I was wondering if we could go into more detail about what exactly that is.
Well, we're going to have, I think it's 3 hours of a symposium, if you will. We're going to be hearing from Marino Fermenti, who is he's going to go over some of the binocular vision abnormalities and anomalies that need to be evaluated and managed properly when you're caring for these myopic patients. So again, I think that's an area that scares doctors off. But Marino's presentation.
Why is that an area that scares doctors off?
I think many doctors will say, well, binocular vision anomalies are too complicated. They take too much time. It's too difficult to remedy. So a lot of doctors kind of skirt around it a little bit and maybe don't dig into it as much as they should. So what we need is a more streamlined and simplistic approach to it. And Marino does a fabulous job of doing that. So I think that's going to be a really nice thing to attend, to just kind of get your brain working again into that. How does large exophorias impact things? How do large esophorias impact things? What should we be doing? What should we be looking for? And what kind of gravity do we need to give those conditions, and how they're influencing our patients? And then that's going to move right into I think what's going to be a super cool lecture by Langis Michaud, who's coming down from the University of Montreal to talk to us about corneal biomechanics and how they influence orthokeratology outcomes. Every now and then you run into a tricky case where, it looks like it should be simple. It's a moderate level of nearsightedness. It's a, normal shaped cornea. Everything should be a slam dunk, but sometimes you run into some troubles and things just aren't going the way that you think they should be going. And a lot of that has to do with the actual cornea that you're dealing with. And we're getting more and more technology available to us that helps us understand these corneal biomechanics and how they influence corneal molding and all facets really of contact lens wear and myopia control. So I think that's going to be a really nice way to kick off Vision by Design. I really think it's going to be a very popular couple of lectures, and I'm personally looking forward to hearing both of them. It's really awesome stuff.
Vision by Design started as a primarily ortho-k meeting. It's now, I heard someone describe it as the Super Bowl of myopia control, and that's how I prefer to look at it. You won't find another meeting that's completely devoted to myopia control. Go ahead.
It started in 2008 with our first. We've been ahead of the curve so far, and you'll find things at our meeting now today that you won't find at any other meetings that are ahead of the curve as far as myopia control management.
How is Vision by Design ahead of the curve?
We have aspects of it that will actually get into the actual care of the patients. Instead of just theorizing, what does this mean? As far as myopia, we actually have doctors who do this stuff, and they come to these meetings, and even if they're not on the platform and they're talking, they are attending, and you literally will learn from them right on the spot, the cutting edge stuff that's happening right now in the field. A topic like atropine, and changing doses of atropine to get the most effective myopia, and doing that with different systems like ortho-k or multifocal soft contact lenses. There's people at the meeting that are going to be talking about that, and there's people in the hallways that are attending that meeting are doing that, and you don't find that anywhere else. Usually what you have is you have a set of speakers up in the front there that give you all the theory. You have people who are sitting there that listen to that, but you don't have the other part of it, which we have at our meetings, which are actual people who have put that, are working with it. We have amazing members to our group that actually are all, they're all moving at this fast speed that we are, and they're actually teaching us as they go, and we're learning from them because they're applying it. They're taking it right into the practice because that's the kind of people they are. They don't wait for the thing to happen. They make the thing happen. And so that's the reason why Vision by Design is so much different than that, because you will actually meet the innovators at that meeting.
Yeah, and you'll be shoulder to shoulder with other attendees who are, crazy passionate people who are looking for something else. They're looking for something different that they can take back to their practice. Because, which is better, one or two, it just isn't cutting it anymore.
Doesn't cut it, no.
So that's the kind of group you want to be associated with, and Vision by Design is the spot. And it's going to be April 15th through the 19th in Bellevue, Washington. And we did start as an ortho-k meeting, so the website address for our meeting is orthokmeeting.com. Like I said, we're the Super Bowl of myopia control. And so some final thoughts I wanted to pose to each one of you. What is one particular lecture that because, you guys have been going to and participating in these meetings for a while now, a long time. So I'm going to throw it over to Paul first. Paul, what's one particular lecture that you are super excited about, even being a veteran attendee, even being somebody who attends these meetings and sets up the educational program or is a part of that process?
Oh, I'm really excited to hear from Noel Brennan. He's going to be talking to us about how do we assess the efficacy in myopia control. And I think that's just so important. And he's a world-class speaker. We're really privileged to have him at our meeting.
I had a chance to listen to Noel in Europe. Believe me, you're going to walk in thinking one way, you're going to leave thinking another. He's going to challenge your presumptions in this field and the way you treat.
And I have to say, I mean, it's impossible for me to pick only one that I'm super excited about, but that's just the one that kind of struck out, at me first.
For sure. I mean, it's like trying to pick, between, you have this amazing feast of knowledge put in front of you, and you're just going to gobble it all up. It's not.
It's like lectures are 1A, 1B, 1C.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not saying your favorite or anything like that. I'm just saying what's one of many things, because in future episodes we can definitely talk about other lectures and whatnot. So Cary,
there's not going to be a dull moment. I can promise you that.
Never. Yeah. It's Carly Lamb's presentation, the dim spectacle lens. I know Carly personally. I've met her at HK. She's the leader. She was a leader there at the community. She still is, Hong Kong Polytechnic. And she's got a spectacle lens that's going to kick the myopia field on its rear end as far as control. I can't wait till we have access to it. But she's there. I want to know what went through her mind as she developed this concept, and because this is really innovation and it's really hard. I mean, this is a person who brought this to reality, and I want to know what her thinking was and how she went through that path to come to this, because I think that's got to be a fascinating story, and that's a fascinating product that's becoming available. Talk about increasing scope of practice for all of us, having a spectacle lens that's going to do a number on myopia control. Definitely. Can't wait, boys and girls.
Yeah, definitely exciting stuff for sure. All right, well, if that's something that if you're listening to this and this sounds like something that you want to be a part of, again, orthokmeeting.com is the website. It's April 15th through the 19th, and if you're one of those people that every single year you hear, from your colleagues, your friends about Vision by Design, make this year the year that you come and be a part of it, because it's an incredible experience. So Paul, Cary, thank you very much for joining me, and let's have another one of these episodes done, real soon.
Sounds awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Well, that's it for this episode of The Corrected View. Remember that this is a community-based podcast, so it's not my opinion that matters about myopia control, but yours. If you have something to add to the discussion, join us in the AAOMC Facebook group or email the podcast at thecorrectedview@gmail.com.